Growing pressure on the United States over its unprecedented killing of 11 unknown people off the coast of Venezuela has exploded, with the Vice President J.D. Vance showing just how lawless and illegal the administration is prepared to be. Now, you'll recall that last week, a boat carrying 11 people who were labelled as drug smugglers by the Trump team was blown out of the water by the US military. The argument was that these were all members of the Venezuelan criminal gang called Tren de Aragua. The US has designated that group as a terrorist organisation. And the first thing that many of us said at the time was, since when does the US summarily execute people it believes to be criminals, even if you do call them terrorists? And since we have no information about these people, what they were doing, how do we even know that they were what is being claimed? Well, those questions have been getting louder ever since, and recently resulted in a big blow-up between the Vice President J.D. Vance and perhaps the last remaining Republican gadfly in Congress, Rand Paul. Vance had posted initially on Twitter this: "Killing cartel members who poison our fellow citizens is the highest and best use of our military." Obviously, that was in response to questions that were being raised without pointing to a specific charge or question. Then Brian Krasenstein replied to that tweet saying, "Killing the citizens of another nation who are civilians without any due process is called a war crime." I'm not even sure if that doesn't understate it, since the US is not in a state of war, not with Venezuela or indeed with the cartel. But, okay, leave that to one side for a moment. J.D. Vance came back with the heartwarming message. "I don't give a shit what you call it," he said. So there you go, a simpler pronouncement as you can get. America does not care about the rule of law anymore. Now, this riled Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, and he posted this on Twitter. "JD I don't give a shit Vance says killing people he accuses of a crime is the highest and best use of the military. Did he ever read To Kill a Mockingbird? Did he ever wonder what might happen if the accused were immediately executed without trial or representation? What a despicable and thoughtless sentiment it is to glorify killing someone without a trial." Now, Senator Rand Paul is many things, but he's certainly never been accused of being a bleeding heart liberal. Indeed, he's been leading, for example, the charge to see Anthony Fauci prosecuted. But he does have his own principles, and he doesn't care if he infuriates the Trump team when he stands by those principles, as he last did by voting against Trump's big spending bill, on the basis that he is also under the principle of not increasing the national debt. And he does so knowing he's likely to be the only one. Other Republicans have declined to criticise the boat strike. Personally, I always think you should give credit to people, including those whose views you consider profoundly wrong, when they stand up for what they believe in the face of their own peer group and in the expense of their own advancement. In any case, many people who agree with Paul on almost nothing agreed with him on the argument that glorifying killing someone without trial is indeed a despicable thing to do. Now, President Trump claimed that the boat had been transporting drugs from Venezuela directly to the United States. Unfortunately for the other members of his team, tasked with never contradicting Trump while still trying not to be wholly untethered from reality, they had to find a way around the fact that the boat was 2,700 miles away from the US at the time, clearly not on a direct course for it. The idea that you would set off from Venezuela in a small motorboat, travel all the way to the United States, and if you were doing that to transport drugs, you'd have 11 people on board, taking up most of the space in that boat. It's kind of barking mad, whichever way you look at it. Marco Rubio came up with a formula for the cargo on the boat, quote, "was headed towards, eventually, the United States," which is a framing that is at least kind of in line with the laws of physics, so that's something, but still offered without evidence of any sort. Members of Congress might have been hoping to get such evidence at the classified briefings that were scheduled for Friday last week. Well, they were abruptly cancelled, so no. And it's still not a legal argument, even if there were evidence for it, because it wouldn't make it okay just to kill people, even if it were true that they were, however improbably, on a record-setting long boat trip to the United States. Administration officials have tried various arguments which seem not to stand up to scrutiny. So they told Politico, for instance, that the strike was permitted because of the designation of a group as a terrorist organisation. Quote, "If there was a boat full of Al-Qaeda fighters smuggling explosives towards the US, would anyone even ask this question?" Others online had drawn the comparison with the taking out of Osama bin Laden. But of course, following the September 11th attack, Congress determined the US to be at war with Al-Qaeda, which officially made them combatants under domestic and international law. That is not the case here. Designating them as a terrorist organisation gives legal authority to the president to levy financial penalties and other sanctions, not just to use lethal force with the same sort of casualness you might take to a duck shoot, if you were the sort of person who does that sort of thing. Then another argument is being made by the administration that the president has the authority under Article 2 of the Constitution to use military force when it is in the national interest. But, as CNN quoted legal experts as saying, such power still requires that the president should establish that the targets are legitimate military targets who qualify as combatants under both international and domestic law. Cartel members, drug smugglers have traditionally been treated as criminals, therefore with due process rights, as they should be. Bear in mind, drug smuggling is not itself a capital crime in the United States, so how can it be legal to summarily execute people because they might be engaged in something that doesn't carry the death penalty? Any argument that might have held weight would, at the very least, have to establish that the boat couldn't simply have been intercepted, with the occupants then taken into custody. Marco Rubio admitted that such an interception could, indeed, have been carried out, but he said that wouldn't have been good enough. He said this to a press conference in Mexico City. "The United States has long, for many, many years, established intelligence that allows us to interdict and stop drug boats. We did that, and it doesn't work. What will stop them is when you blow them up, when you get rid of them." And he added, for good measure, "Instead of interdicting it, on the president's orders, we blew it up. And it'll happen again. Maybe it's happening right now." Very much at one with J.D. Vance then. So we wait for the next exciting instalment. Several US Navy ships, of course, remain near Venezuela in international waters. Thousands of troops are present. Will their presence result in a massive downturn in the flow of drugs from Venezuela? Doubtful. Venezuela doesn't produce many drugs. It is one of the transit routes for cocaine produced in Colombia and Ecuador, but most of that traffic goes via the Pacific, not via the Caribbean. The cocaine routes are many and flexible, and let's face it, it's not as though the US has never tried to disrupt them before. According to the New York Times, analysts have said that the US action is more a symbolic show of force than it is a practical anti-drug strategy. Indeed, it might even just be a test case, going out of their way to kill people without due process, very small scale, maybe testing the degree of pushback and resistance that gets generated. Because the Trump administration's general rule is that if you push over a line and nobody then stops you or does anything but a bit of light squealing, then the stage is set for you to push that bit further. Venezuela, of course, is seeking to discourage them from pushing further, perhaps remembering all the way back to 1989 when the US military invaded Panama and deposed General Noriega, having labelled him as a major drug trafficker. Venezuelan Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello said yesterday they publicly declared that they killed 11 people in a non-war situation in international waters. They are putting on the table that everything's fair game. He was speaking following reports that Venezuela had flown 2 jets into international waters, bringing them within range of at least one of those US warships. Now that is the kind of standoff that can go horribly wrong. If the US can kill people in international waters, it can definitely shoot a military jet out of the sky. And that could easily then be the second step, possibly the one that would provide the paper-thin excuse to seek to take out Nicolas Maduro himself. You know, unless Maduro quickly does something to make amends, like, I don't know, I would recommend that maybe he nominates President Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize. It seems to work, usually, and I mean, why not? Wouldn't be more surreal than anything else we've seen in the last 7 months.